Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.
Welcome to Windows on the World. Tonight we're in Didcot, Oxford, after The Bigger Picture, our series of talks which we've been taking round the country. We're in a rather nice, what do they call them in America? This is an SUV. We're in an SUV.
Oh, wow, my God.
Yes. We've
CO2 polluting.
That's one of the Corbyn brothers there, and we'll be hearing from him a bit later in the show. But yes, we're in the back of a rather nice vehicle and we've had a good day. Great turnout in Didcot. Barry and Calvin are in the front seat driving as usual because because they've been in the front seat driving all day, and it's been a really good show. And we've got some great information out. So if you'd like to book The Bigger Picture, do get in touch with us and we can book a show in your local area. First of all, I'm going to go over to our audience member. Can you introduce yourself, please, audience member?
Hi, my name is Annalisa Frank and I am from Glastonbury, living in Glastonbury, and I've driven Sandy Adams up here today.
Yes, now, how do you find Glastonbury?
It's just off the A39.
That's not quite what I meant.
And what's wrong with the A39?
I thought you might say that. Glastonbury is a very interesting place, full of a lot of different energies, a lot of good, a lot of bad, a bit like anywhere really. But yeah, a very, very interesting place as far as what it attracts, the kind of people that live there, including me, and the kind of events that take place there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we did a talk down in Glastonbury about a year or so ago, and we had quite a good turnout there. What I've noticed is that we're getting more and more people who want to put these talks on. Now, you've never seen this talk before, have you? So,
I've not seen yours personally, no. I've seen all your stuff online.
Yes. What did you think of The Bigger Picture? Was it too much to take in, or did you get a lot out of it?
I got an enormous lot out of it. I guess I'm kind of lucky, really, that I've already looked into a lot of the stuff that was covered. I saw peers speaking at the King Arthur, Sandy's pub in Glastonbury sometime back last year, wasn't it?
It was last year.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm already clued up with quite a few things. And as I say, I've been watching you for quite some time as well. But I still learn something every time. Every time I go to an event like this, I learn something new.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, there's a lot of information in there, but what we're trying to do is get it over in a very kind of down-to-earth kind of way. In other words, there's a bit of repetition in the theme because it's basically about how this global totalitarian agenda's being rolled out, and Sandy goes into the detail of Agenda 21. I kind of touch on it and go through it and how it actually gets sort of enforced locally. Now, have you seen signs of what I was talking about in your local area in Glastonbury?
Yes, I have. And I've also seen the signs actually where we're sitting right now, which of course we talked about when we first arrived here today. Yes, of course, I see it rolling out locally. I see what's going on with particular agendas. Dare I mention the Green Party? I probably dare. And I do realise...
Well dead.
I'm seeing now what's happening at the so-called grassroots level. I'm seeing what's happening among these so-called community hubs and initiatives that are there to do various trainings, which is all to do with Agenda 21. I also see what's happening with Extinction Rebellion and how that's sucking in a lot of people, probably making myself very unpopular now among a lot of my so-called friends in Glastonbury. But it's just so obvious. It's so in plain sight. You know, that's the best way to do things. Do it in plain sight, because then people won't see it.
This is the important thing, because it's a template, it's a global template that's been rolled out locally, and it is a template. And once you see the template, you can't unsee it, because they're using a very simplistic way of doing it, which is basically they put their agents into small communities. They take them over through community hubs. They bring in what we call change agents or social entrepreneurs or community organisers, and they control all council meetings by a process called Delphi technique, which is basically controlling group behaviour. And most people in the country will be able to relate to that if they see it once. So basically, once this template is busted, it's kind of busted forever. Now, Piers Corbyn and myself went down to the regeneration meeting and the Old Kent Road, and I perfectly described how Delphi technique worked, and we had a chat beforehand, and newsflash, they were using Delphi technique, weren't they, Piers?
They were.
Was that the first time you've ever come across this?
Well, I'd come across that sort of operation before, but it was very clear and specific and explicit at that meeting. Because, see, that was a very important meeting. There's the Old Kent Road regeneration plan, basically to do something 5 times bigger than the Haygate estate, create a new town in the Old Kent Road. So obviously the council don't want this to go wrong, the developers don't want this to go wrong, so they packed the meeting with various, well, change agents, or if you like, they were consultants brought in to assist the conversation, you know. But it's conducted in a very prescriptive manner, which is what Mark has decided. Namely, they come there with a blueprint, they want the blueprint adopted, so they break the meeting up into little groups and ask different questions attached to the blueprint, and sort of grunting yeses, or you know, there are stupid questions like how many more cycle lanes do you want, or stuff, you know what I mean? They don't go into the basics. But the council pretend this is consultation when they've already decided they're going to do this and create a new town up the Old Kent Road, unless we can stop it through mass action, which of course we are attempting to do.
Yes, that's the really interesting thing about it, because it's implemented with no public consultation, and that's what I found out years ago when I was living in a borough of North East London called Waltham Forest, which stayed the same. Well, I was there 25 years and it stayed the same for 23 of them. Last 2 years I was there, it radically changed and there was no consultation going on. When I found out that the so-called consultation wasn't a consultation, then I realised that what I'd been told by people in different parts of the country was the same template. I started looking then into how these people are trained, and it is very strange. You'll live in an area and these people will turn up on your doorstep and they will not be known in the local community. Then they will start to control the narrative of what's going on there. And it's interesting, I was talking to one of the people who came from Kent today, and he said in Tunbridge there's a very similar thing going on, in that a small local newspaper starts. We had one in Waltham Forest called the Waltham Forest Echo. Now, we can't say this is an absolutely subversive publication, but what it did, it went along with the so-called Mini Holland, the Agenda 21, which was part of the City Villages project, which came through the it comes through the Cabinet Office, but it's the money was allegedly from Transport for London. And what happened was, when they had the consultation rollout, it was actually rolled out as though everyone had already agreed, but there'd been no consultation.
Exactly.
So there'd been no consultation at that point, and the consultations are always fixed. They are rushed through. Most people don't know when they are. If they do turn up, they'll get shouted down or get distracted by the Delphi technique, which is a facilitator who has basically an agenda that they're steering the whole of the group into, and they have their own people. Now, when we were talking about Extinction Rebellion, it's exactly the same template. The reason Extinction Rebellion is on the front page of every newspaper and hundreds of them haven't been beaten up and arrested is because they are doing the job of the state. This is what they call controlled opposition. And once you've seen this process, it's absolutely transparently obvious what's going on, because they are promoting all the agendas of the UN, which is the Agenda 2030 rollout, which is basically to get everyone out of their cars into these very surveilled cities, out of the countryside, depopulate the countryside. And it's all about surveillance and control. And people are starting to see it. So what happens is, all of a sudden, they realise that they're in the middle of a dystopian nightmare, and they didn't vote for it, and they don't know what happened, and that's going on all over the country. But what I was going to do was bring in Sandy to the conversation now, because you've looked into the background of Agenda 21 and how it's implemented, and you obviously see the signs of it. Now, all this stuff about change agents and all the stuff I was talking about today, does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's funny because last night I was going through the global diversity assessment, and it was funny because they've got a whole chapter on agents of change. Agents of change.
It's not a conspiracy theory. Books, documents, UN documents.
These are United Nations documents, and the whole of the of Agenda 21 is actually laid out in the Global Biodiversity Assessment. That is the blueprint for putting Agenda 21 into action. And yeah, all this, certainly the agents of change, there's a whole section on that in this huge tome of a book that I carry around to the talks, just to prove that it's not a conspiracy theory, because so many people still think that Agenda 21 is a conspiracy theory. And we have all the documentation to prove that it's not. And I just say to people, don't believe what I say. Do your own research. You find out about Agenda 21, the 42 chapter document that is Agenda 21. And all of this is available to anyone. And we had a fantastic audience, I have to say, today.
Yeah, we did.
Really switched on audience. They were amazing.
Well, I think you producing the book in front of people really just clinches it. You see, denying that, claiming it's a conspiracy theory is just absurd, because there's a book there. Yeah. It's like saying you've got a handbook to how to manage your washing machine, and I say, don't be ridiculous, that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Well, of course, I mean, exactly. It's just a handbook on how to manage a washing machine. Like this is a handbook on how to manage world population in the interests of the super duper rich, George Soros and the World Economic Forum. And they've got specifically, as a number of us mentioned, a green report now. The World Economic Forum has a green report. It says we need $1 trillion a year to save the planet through mass spending on stupid projects which won't save any planet. Yeah. But, it'll be more, they want to invest £1 billion in more battery research and production. Well, we don't need any more batteries. They're an inefficient way of doing things. Yeah. We need to have better use of existing resources, coal and oil. And of course, you can make them clean. You can remove the smoke if you want to. But, see, when you explain this stuff to people, they're actually quite. They are a bit taken aback. So I was going to ask you,
it's a shock, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a shock. I want to ask you. When we explain to people, look, Extinction Rebellion was set up by the internet operators, ExxonMobil and the 5G companies through Citizens Online, and the person that controls and manages Greta Thunberg is paid for by One.org, which is George Soros and Bill Gates' front. Now, that stuff it speaks volumes, but when you explain this to people in Glastonbury, what do they say to you? Because they don't know this and they're just being used. What do they do? Are they get angry, frightened?
A lot
think
of them
you're
get
mad?
Angry.
Or what?
A lot of them get angry. A lot of them obviously come out with that worn-out bloody statement now. Oh, you're a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah. Okay.
I said, no, I'm just somebody who is questioning. If that makes me a conspiracy theorist, then call it what you like. But what I'm doing is actually looking at the evidence. I'm seeing that book, seeing, Agenda 21, seeing that
we should
huge
put the link
tome
directly.
We
should put the link on Windows on the World, so you can go to the UN and download the damn thing.
You can do. Yeah,
you can do easily.
This is the point that it's not even.
It's all out there.
It's not secret at all.
It's not secret. It's kind of.
It's a railway timetable, if you like. You know what I mean?
This
a
is
railway
the interesting
timetable
thing.
running the world.
Exactly
that the cabinet member for the environment in Waltham Forest, Clyde Lokes, actually said, thank you, Mark, when I sent him this show called London's Dystopia, which is actually about the regeneration going on in Haringey and indirectly the borough of Waltham Forest, because what he'd done, he's implemented the principles and the agendas of the UN Agenda 21 in Waltham Forest. That was his job. He brought in the whole of the habitat, city villages, smart cities agenda into Waltham Forest, and it was directly down to him that this happened. So he's the cabinet member for the environment. I sent him this thing, which was a show which featured Gordon Peters, who brought down this Haringey development vehicle, which is basically Lend-Lease owning half of Haringey. So the infrastructure's all been sold off. And he said, "Thank you, Mark, but as I don't subscribe to the hugely discredited conspiracy theory of an Agenda 21 takeover of the world, I find it of no value whatsoever." Now, the point is that it's absolutely incredible that he could come out with that. So I challenged him to a debate on it and said, which of the 40 chapters of Agenda 21, etc. I read it out today. But that is kind of beyond absurd, isn't it? Because when they'll lie like that in your face, then that means...
Where do you go?
Well, you keep sticking to the facts. But the point is that this kind of... It's kind of implausible deniability, isn't it? You know, it's like, what on earth are they talking about? It is so absurd. It's beyond absurd, actually. It's almost like comedy. But that's the thing, that the Extinction Rebellion has been absolutely socially engineered to exactly the right crowd. People who are mentally disempowered. And that's the only reason it works. I mean, the only people you see on those protests are people who've got nothing to do. As that Russian general said, Konstantin Petrov, he said the globalists need the anti-globalists to implement their policies. So the anti-globalists have nothing to do. So they need to be steered and funded. And that's what happens. So basically, you can tell that it's a state-funded operation. It's so obvious. Compare that to the Yellow Vests. I mean, can you imagine these people doing yoga on Westminster Bridge and having their eyes blown out? Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely absurd that you could compare the two things, you know, as though one's a protest, you know, and they're saying like the Yellow Vests is, that just gets completely left out of the news now. Yeah. And then you've got this Extinction Rebellion thing, and it's called a protest. I mean, those people in France must be laughing their heads off.
Absolutely,
you know.
Yeah.
I first came across Extinction Rebellion, actually, at the Off-Grid Festival last year. Now, this is when...
Gail Bradbrook spoke there. Was that Gail?
Had they called themselves Extinction Rebellion then?
They were calling themselves... no, they were calling themselves Rising Up.
Rising
and then
Up,
the
right.
Extinction Rebellion was coming from Rising Up.
Yeah, and
Right.
Citizens Online
Okay, but
is the organisation behind it.
seemed at that time a grassroots thing.
Seemed.
You know,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
seemed... And it's only afterwards that when I started to look into it that I realised that it wasn't.
Yeah.
But it seemed like something that really was grassroots, giving out little leaflets. But then it got more and more sophisticated.
And they look kind of anarchistic.
Who was
Yeah.
But
paying
a
for
bit
all
too
these
well
leaflets?
produced
You
to
know
be
what it's like,
anarchistic.
how much it costs
Oh,
to
it
print
costs
out a
a
few
fortune.
leaflets
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
flyers.
Yeah.
And they're pretty
And
glossy
all
as
of
well.
a sudden, the stuff was glossy. It was
That's right.
organised.
Yeah.
They were training people, you know. And I thought, hang on a minute, where is this money coming from? There's paying for all of this because it's not coming from these, you know, grassroots hippie type people,
No.
off-grid supporters.
Well, they say it's
Who's
online
behind
payments.
it? And that's when I started to look into
Well,
it.
it's a lot of it, they say, comes from online donations. But you see, a lot of these online donations are anonymous and very large amounts of money. If you and I ask for online donations, like Windows on the World does, or sometimes Weather Action we ask them for, or Scientists for Truth ask, we get tiny amounts, right?
Yeah.
We don't get large anonymous, 50,000 quids here and there.
And it's also about the money being siphoned off. You know, just exactly what happened with Occupy. The money is...
They pay people to herd people around.
Yeah.
They do. But see, I think all is not lost, because quite a lot of these youth who turned up, when I went along, we've had a group of us Scientists for Truth giving out leaflets on Waterloo Bridge. They fall into 2 or 3 categories. One of them who just denied our existence. Now, there's the organisers in charge who wanted to keep us away or stand in front of us so no one could see us, that sort of stuff. Then there were reasonably informed people who were genuinely taken aback that CO2 was the gas of life when they thought it was the gas of death, and they did engage and took some leaflets. And others of those, some of them just went into denial, said, you're paid by the oil companies, and others actually were genuinely concerned. Now, when I gave a talk a discussion at Speaker's Corner on the bank holiday Sunday. Somebody turned up there who had been in Extinction Rebellion, and he was really pissed off. He was what I call a true green. He believed in, collective little meetings, holding hands and having discussion about what to do, what I mean, all the time. And he said, they told us we were going to have discussion about what to do, but it didn't happen.
Yeah.
We should have had people's assemblies on Waterloo Bridge, but we didn't. Yeah. It just didn't happen. The organisers told us we were going to have assessment meetings. He had been along to one of them, and he was told, it's already been assessed. In other words, we don't need you. You're just here as cannon fodder, if you like. Yeah. And this guy, I'm sure, he won't be back at Extinction Rebellion. Or if he is, he's going to be there as a rebellion against Extinction Rebellion. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
one of the things I felt about...
I think it'll fall apart as a thing within a few weeks.
It didn't feel to me like it was solution focused.
No, it's not. It's not.
Which of course it isn't.
It's genuinely
and
making a noise.
I am a very solution focused person. So that was also ringing alarm bells. I thought, what the heck is going on
here? It's calling on the authorities to do something.
And emotion.
And what it means doing is the World Economic Forum produced their green report and say, we want $1 billion a year spent on blah, 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 or whatever.
And who's going to pay
or $1 trillion. And who's going to pay for it? And the answer, they've got the answer already. It's got to come from funds which are locked away, which means the biggest corporations, pension funds, they want to rob those pension funds to actually save the banks. That's what will happen. That's what they want to happen.
Yeah, that's already been announced, and that's the way it's going. And we have reported on all this stuff, and we do report on a lot of the same issues over and over again because they seem to be the most important things going on at the moment. And the way this links together perfectly describes social engineering and the controlling of the narrative of all public opinion, and that's what's going on. I don't think that even several years ago, I would have anticipated the closing down and shutting down of all speech which is outside the accepted corridor of opinion and what's actually happened. And this thing with Twitter is absolutely unbelievable, slightly changing the subject, but Danny Baker getting sacked for what he did. I mean, this is the weird thing, isn't it? What they'll do is they'll go back into your Twitter feed from years and years ago, and that's what they did with me when they were trying to link me to negative stuff.
You and me, loads of stuff. And I'm labelled, all sorts of labels, but I think some of these tweets I've been shown I'm meant to have tweeted out are fake tweets. That's what I think.
You wouldn't remember, would you? And
I wouldn't remember.
You probably
I think they're fake
to
tweets. Also, these days, people can enter your computer from the back, the back ways. There are ways in, and they could have been sending out tweets on my behalf. And
but
I don't
what's
know.
disturbing about
it
is that the amount of importance that's attached to this nonsense and this trivia. So everything is down to the level of trivia now. And it's all about someone tweeted this or someone tweeted that, and this joke, that joke was a bad thing to say, and all the rest of it. What the hell has this got to do with anything? It's got nothing to do with anything. And it's all about distraction issues. And that's where all this stuff comes in. Now, in part 2 of this show, which I'm going to upload straight after, I talk about Land Grab UK. And there's another thing that's coming off the back of organisations, fake protest groups like Extinction Rebellion, and it's called landjustice.uk. Look that up. What they're doing is going onto private land and causing a lot of trouble, and this is all about this. Again, it's the Global Action Plan. They are trying to take land and call it for the common good, which means for the common good of the World Bank, the IMF, and of course the UN, the Global Action Plan. And this is about another land grab. So they need the public to get involved in this. And what they need the public to do is turn against people who own land. This is what they're doing now. But they had a huge own goal, and that's going to be reported in the second part of this show, which I prepared earlier. So I think we've had a really good day. I'd like to thank Barry and Calvin and say hello, guys.
Yeah, guys. Well, maybe they should say something about it.
I think they should.
What they think about what happened, what was said, and what do you learn from this or not?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to ask.
Oh, sorry.
So maybe Barry first and then Calvin,
Well, thanks, guys, for taking your time out to coming down today. I really appreciate it. So I think today a lot of people today were quite switched on to what was going on. So there was a lot of sub-conversation going on while you guys were talking. There's just so much information. It's really hard to try and 6 hours seems like a long time, but actually it disappears into nothing when you're in a room of people who like to share information. I just really want to thank you guys for coming down, taking the time out of your own personal lives to come down and do this. It's massive, and without guys like you, this information can't get out.
Well, that's very nice.
appreciate it.
But what about specifics that was said by the three of us, which is kind of you want to apply or have been useful, or what would you say? What would you want to say to audience that wasn't there? What did
you pick up? What
did
was
you
the
pick up?
most useful bits of information that you came across in the talk? Because you guys are quite switched on anyway, aren't you?
Go on, Kelly.
Yeah. I think just the actual deceptive nature of this global agenda. I think this is the message that gives more questions, than little, really. I think.
It's like a shadow government that you didn't know about, really.
Exactly. And I think it's such a layered, deceptive concept that I think we really just need to get this information out to a lot of people that are not aware of this. I mean, we're to be honest, we're talking real complex stuff here that a majority of people are not aware of, and I think this is the challenge. The challenge to everybody is to put this into layman's terms, because personally, I've come here today. Even though I've organised this with Barry, I've come here as a lay person to understand and to really to let this information sink in. And I think from you guys, I've learned so much today. It's really, really important that we keep spreading this message and take it out to communities that really don't fully understand it like you guys understand it. And this is really important, just to keep it very basic and very focused on what the issues are that you're presenting. And I think if we keep it that way, then we can really put a positive message out, even though the topic is pretty
I like the information they came out with. How many specific trees were chopped down for 5G or something? Something along those lines. That's an interesting one, which is probably pertinent right now. A lot of people
we should be demanding locally.
And also, the question you asked me:
Stop
what
5G.
do you see that's happening locally? What's happening in your area? Sitting here now, where we are right now, and looking behind us at all these buildings that have been boarded up and closed, and they're going to start building regeneration and all of that stuff, and how putting everybody into high-rise blocks next to stations.
Sustainable
it's all
high-rise
part
blocks.
of this plan to get people into cities, into urban areas, to have them all controlled. All of that stuff. People can begin to see what's happening in their local area. It's us pointing out to them and saying, well, look, can't you see what's going on there? Have you thought about why that's happening? And then linking it to this big global plan, because it is local and it's global.
So do you think our answer of saying action for life and make action for life
Action
as a kind
for
of
life.
as opposed to Extinction Rebellion, which is a death cult, really, because they're advertising the end of the world. This is
In
mad.
12 years.
Whereas we want action for life and make it specific, like we've got to stop this wind farm because it's a waste of money and killing insects and birds and bats, and we've got to
because you've set up a website for it already.
actionforlife.org.
It's positive
It will be
strategies
we'll
for
get,
what we
we'll
can
get
do.
some
specifics, and
stuff out.
if anything comes out of government, because they will do, they're going to come out with some huge $1 billion spending. We've got to say that has to be referred to an independent committee of scientists can say if this is nonsense. I mean, the European Union is now entertaining a £1 billion or €1 billion plan to improve batteries. Well, or even make more batteries.
What a waste of money.
We don't need more batteries. Instead, we should have electrification of Africa, for example, to stop people dying over, women dying over smoke, smoky fires because they don't have electricity. So, I mean, we need to be practical. Whereas Extinction Rebellion is deliberately not practical.
Well, that's kind of a
they want to
cartoon.
give the go-ahead.
That's kind
of
of
give the
it's aimed
go-ahead
at
to
the
the
people
World
who are
Economic
going
Forum. to
get involved
to rob
with it.
us.
The people who are getting involved with that are secondary, they're actors. It's
Yeah.
all they're there for is to reinforce this agenda and basically make it look as though they're forcing the government to do anything. I mean, the whole thing is absurd to anybody who knows anything about protest.
Yeah.
It's absolutely absurd because, as you were saying, they don't have clearly defined goals.
Yeah.
What their goals are the Agenda 21 SR15, this document called the Special Report 15, which they founded the whole of Extinction Rebellion on, which most of them don't even know
Oh, they
exists.
don't know. It's not
No,
a-
it's an enormous whine.
And
actually.
where are their solutions? They're not
Yeah, they
solution
don't
have no
focused.
solutions.
No, it's a big whinge. The whole thing is a big whinge.
That's right.
Let's have a die-in.
Well,
Let's have a die-in.
What are you doing tonight? I'm going for a die-in. You know.
It was a cheap Easter holiday for the increasingly dispossessed middle classes. Actually, that's what it was. Their youth who would normally fly off to Tenerife. Dads and mums have said we ain't got the money, so you go and do your Extinction Rebellion protest instead.
Well, one of my friends said to me, "Are
that's
you
one of
coming
my
to
arguments.
Extinction Rebellion in London at the
Coming
weekend?"
to.
And I went, "No, I'm going to Sheffield's folk sessions. Thank you very much." And so I went off to Sheffield. And then, of course, I had a look at what was happening in Sheffield and all the trees and the implementation of 5G. So
Right.
it wasn't running away. It was actually going to do a little bit of research and looking at the whole 5G agenda,
Well,
which,
of course,
we haven't
But then
particularly touched on
the Green
today,
Party
but we have
support
mentioned
the
it.
chopping down of trees for 5G, don't they?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
that is monstrous.
Yeah.
Green Party
And-
supports chopping down trees.
Yeah.
I'll repeat that.
But they
If Caroline
also,
Lucas is listening, which we know she doesn't, but she could pass it on, it makes no sense from what they call a Green Party. I mean, it's
well, the Green Party also
It's a tool.
really support the smart city agenda.
Of course they do.
And that's why, I mean, we've got a battle going on in Glastonbury at the moment because of the rollout of the technology for 5G is being put up for the festival, and of course, I think we've got a mast going up on the local church apparently. So we've,
Really?
I've been in touch with two councillors, and been told, well. We understand that 5G could be a problem, but you have to prove that it is a problem,
Yes.
bad for human beings, and then we will look at it. But in that time, everything is, Glastonbury Festival is due, the end
That's
of June.
ridiculous.
So we've got, they're saying it's our responsibility to actually form a community action group to which will get infiltrated to prove that 5G is bad for you.
But how much more 5G do you want in your neighbourhood?
Yeah, exactly. There'll be a
how
consensus.
fast can we bring it in?
There'll
Will you
be a
let us bring it in?
consensus, and then it'll be it's fine. Oh, sorry, it's all up now.
Well,
yeah.
I know
I mean-
it's over the pond, but looking at what Tom Wheeler
Yeah.
said, from the FCC in the States, he said, we are not going to spend any time, energy or money, I'm paraphrasing, on researching, if there are any problems with 5G. We are not
Well,
going to
no, I
do
mean,
that.
surely if it's
We are not going to
potentially
wait for
dangerous,
people
it's-
to investigate it. We're rolling it out, and that's it. You can go and look at him actually saying that. This
surely
is
if-
unbelievable.
If it did get turned into a court case, I mean, for instance, surely these people are supposed to have our best interests at heart. If they're putting us in danger, they have to be
They're
accountable.
indictable,
They're
surely.
indictable, exactly. So there must be something.
Well, if someone gets cancer, and
Well, this is what
can
Mark's
you prove
saying
it got
now,
it from
isn't it?
that?
Mark
you see?
Steele.
That's what he's saying.
Yeah.
That's what he's saying.
Letters of indicted, making people.
Yeah.
Well, that's really
responsible.
what I started my presentation
Making them
off with,
take
is you
responsibility.
can make them accountable.
Yeah.
Like, I started off with very simple things. It's like the Grimebusters website where they put somebody on there who's alleged to have dropped a cigarette who they want to give a fine to and they've got no proof. And that brought down that whole website, because what I did was asked for who was indemnifying that person who put the picture up to do that, who indemnified you, who was underwriting you for the liability. And they gave it to the legal team. Obviously, he got worried after all his bravado, and they've just pulled it all down. But that is what I've always said, you make them personally liable. Why they've now removed themselves from the public arena at most councils, and you try and get in touch with somebody, and there'll be somebody on the phone there to stop you getting through. Now, you used to be able to get through to all these different extensions in the council once you found out where they were. You can't do that anymore. Not in the borough I was living in anyway.
Really?
So they are removing you, and they're becoming more and more remote. And there's a very good reason for that, which is exactly this. They're removing public liability. Now, the thing is that we have liabilities to the council. They have liabilities to us. Now, they can't shirk those responsibilities because they go back hundreds of years. And if that template, which is the basis of law, of constitutional law in this country, is taken away, then that means there is no law. So they have a problem there. And I think the solution is there. It's within the law.
It is.
And that is what people need to
people
learn
need
to
to
do.
actually rely on.
Hold them accountable, because accountability really scares them.
Yeah, there are
does, yeah.
elected representatives, and they have to take responsibility. And if they're not prepared to do that, then they're up for fight. Yeah.
Public interest.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how you ended your presentation today,
Exactly.
Pete.
Yeah, quite right.
You know, accountability.
That's right.
Yeah.
Accountability in science and politics. We have to fight for that tooth and nail. Otherwise, we are doomed to be, well, Britain will become a European Union colony with diktats from on high, manipulated through the super rich and super corporations of the world.
Well, that's great. I think we're going to sign off now. And do listen to the next show after this, which is called UK Land Grab Exposed or Explained. I think it's Exposed. UK Land Grab Exposed. That is absolutely fascinating, and I recorded it earlier on. So that's it from this introduction, and we'll see you somewhere in your local area. If you want us to do a talk, get in touch through the website info@windowsontheworld.net, and we could be doing a talk somewhere near you. So I'd like to thank Barry and Calvin. It's been a great day, and we had a really good crowd of interesting people. That's it for this part of the show. Listen to part 2, and we'll be back next week at 9 p.m.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.